He is the 18th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, just came into office in February of 2017. He and his beautiful wife, Tanya, joined us at the top of the enlisted corps, basically, for our Air Force service. So having this joint opportunity and to get to share this with all of you, since he decided to join my service in 1989, just think about that for a few minutes, 1989, some of you might have remembered being there in 1989. But I find it awesome. He's a fellow medic. He's a dental technician by trade and has served as a PME instructor and various other duties. Deployed all around the world, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, Enduring Freedom, and as well has also had the opportunities to serve overseas in some of our overseas locations. So I, again, thank you for the opportunity to sit here and hear some perspective. I know he's going to give us a lot of insight, because as the advisor to both the Chief of Staff of the Air Force as well as the Secretary of the Air Force, he gets a lot of play and gets to give a lot of information on how we take care of our enlisted tour. So I look forward to hearing his insight onto how we can remain this ready force and serve with our joint partners. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Master Sergeant Wright.
Right. Thank you. Long time. How you been, sir? Yes, sir. All right. Good afternoon, team. How we doing? Good. All right. So first, let me say, man, really, I want to thank Major General Rupp and Miss Charlotte. So as you probably have heard the story, General Rupp birthed me into leadership. So he gave me my first opportunity to be a command chief at McConnell Air Force Base, and I think we were a pretty good team, and we both have seemed to do okay since then. So thank you very much, sir. It's also good to see Colonel Friedrichs, who's my group commander during my time as a senior master sergeant in Alaska. So again, thank you for the invite, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to come out and share some thoughts with you. As I thought about what I really wanted to talk about today, one of the things that I was reading not too long ago, and I came across a couple of quotes, and one that really stood out, Admiral Hyman Rickover. So some of our Navy folks, who's kind of the father of the nuclear Navy, he once said, "The art of war is what's logistically possible." And then if you've ever heard of Sun Tzu, who wrote the book, The Art of War, I just recently learned from one of our Chinese linguists that it's actually Sun Tzu is how you're supposed to say it. But he even went so far as to say the line between order and disorder is logistics. And so when I think about what all of you do here at U.S. Transportation Command, I'm reminded of how important it is to be able to move equipment and personnel and many of the other things that you do for us, how important that is not only to the joint force but to our nation. And so I'd also like to spend a little bit of time talking to you about, my perspective as the senior enlisted member in the United States Air Force, and how we try to prepare for what we believe is future conflict. And as you think about what could potentially happen in the future, now the most immediate thing that all of us are probably thinking about today, Major Ferdinandson, how you doing, sir? Yeah. If you think the most immediate thing that most of us think about today is Korea, right? So that's kind of the alligator in the boat, and that's probably what all of you spend your time thinking about. But just about all of the conflicts that we could potentially find ourselves in have a few things in common. The first thing is that all of them, no matter if it was, and if you've probably heard the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff talk about the 4+1. So Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and then of course the VEO fight that we remain in. So whichever one we find ourselves in, it'll likely be trans-regional in nature. So it won't just be one, certainly won't be one combatant command, and it won't just be, so if we go to war in Korea, it won't just be PACOM's responsibility. There'll be a lot of other folks that will have to be involved in that, and a lot of equipment and people and things that'll need to be moved from various AORs to other AORs. And it'll also be, amongst other things, inherently joint. right? When is the last time we went to war or we executed any type of military operation as a single service? None of us could probably remember. Along with being joint, it'll be coalition based. So those are some of the things that we have to think about and why it's important for us to make sure that we're all ready. And the last characteristic I would say, regardless of what type of battle we find ourselves in, it'll be multi-domain. So we'll have to fight in air, we'll have to fight in space, we'll have to fight in cyber, above sea, under the sea, and of course utilizing our land component and assets. And so with all of that in mind, what is the Air Force doing to prepare our airmen, NCOs, officers to lead in that type of environment? So we've placed I would say a key focus on developing joint leaders. So it's great to see, and I kind of understand the construct of TRANSCOM. I know it's a little bit heavy Air Force, but it's great to see so many joint leaders in the room. It's great to see so many of our Air Force leaders in the room. And this is something that we have to get a little bit better at, being deliberate about, what does being a joint leader mean? I would say, and I would argue, and kind of agree with the chairman who says joint is inherently about understanding, not being. So when we put someone in this environment, we don't want you to be an airman. We don't want you to be a sailor. We don't want you to try to be something that you're not. But what you certainly need to be able to do is understand. And understand from basic stuff like how to recognize ranks into some more advanced stuff as you get into the multi-domain. How certainly most airmen understand air operations, but when you get in this environment, how well do you understand military sea lift and the land component? So we've made a concerted effort to figure out, and this is not about every airman or and I'm assuming it's the same in the other services, but I'll talk about the Air Force for just a minute. This is not about, hey, every airman from the time that you enter the United States Air Force, you need to learn about joint, you need to be prepared for a joint. The fact is, most airmen, probably 80% of airmen, will never serve in a joint environment throughout their careers. It doesn't mean that they don't need to have a basic understanding, but it also doesn't mean that it means that they don't need to go to all the joint schools, and we need to invest all the time and effort in it. We'd like to be more deliberate about who we believe will work in the joint environment. And we have a few career fields that, again, inherently work in joint environments. Some of our ISR personnel and most of our battlefield and what we consider our battlefield airmen, most of you know as special tactics or special forces type airmen. So some of those folks live and reside on Army installations and work closely with other services. So that's a little bit different. But the standard Air Force logistician or personnelist or communicator, when is the right time to get them into an environment like this? How do we better take advantage of someone who's been in an environment like this? So those are the things that we try to work on a regular basis. We try to build programs and certainly for me, being responsible for the development of all of our almost 500,000 total force enlisted airmen, that's a huge consideration in what we do. I'm excited to see that we get pretty good, probably I think about 70 slots a year into some of the joint PMEs where we send airmen into to the Sergeant Major's Academy or the Navy Senior Academy or the Coast Guard Academy. So I think that works. That's only one part. I believe anybody's, when you talk about a career path and what makes it successful is the importance of having a balance between, and harmony is my new word that I've replaced with balance, but having a balance or harmony between education, training, and experience. So this is it's not a huge shift for us. Again, we've had people working in these environments for a long time. We just haven't really taken advantage of certainly the experience once they get ready to leave. So from an Air Force perspective, that's one of the biggest things that I think we can do to ensure folks are ready to fight in this environment. Now, the part about what we traditionally know as readiness and joint readiness, status of resources and training, if we have all of that, if all of our equipment, if all of our airplanes, if we have everybody trained to the standard they need to be trained, that's one part that we continue to focus on. I'll tell you a better assessment from my perspective, and sir, I'd be interested in your opinion about it as well, is this thing we call a commander's assessment. So there's the very objective, do we have these people trained to this standard? Do we have these aircraft or these vehicles or this equipment fixed and ready to go? And then there's the subjective standard of a commander at the unit level saying we are ready to fight. Whether it's tonight, we are ready to go to war in Korea with Iran, China, you have it. So we'll continue to get after that and make sure that our folks are ready. We're also focusing on taking better care of our squadrons, which is in the Air Force, our basic fighting unit, making sure, one, that they're structured the way that they should be structured, and organized the way that they should be organized, but a majority of the work that we're doing in that arena really centers around authorities, and not necessarily authorities to operate, but giving squadron commanders, those basic organizations across the Air Force, the ability to make decisions that affect their readiness, that affect their missions, the ability to take things away, to add things that they think should be more effective. Now let me tell you a little bit about my focus. Traditionally, I've been in this job almost a year now, and when I came into the job, my background and what I'm most comfortable with is leadership development, developing leaders, making leaders the best that they can be, encouraging and inspiring, and being deliberate about that. Right, so that was a focus. I also recognized that I wanted to make sure that I gave airmen time back. I wanted to do as much as I can to take things off of your plate so that you have time to focus on being well trained, you have time to take care of each other, and you have time to take care of yourselves and your families. And then the third thing that I was thinking about, and really, I won't say it was on the periphery, but it wasn't in the forefront. I didn't think it was going to be the thing that eventually became what really, I've hitched my wagon to, and that's resilience. And again, I'd be interested in from the other services perspective and how you see this. But if you think about the picture I just described earlier about the future of conflict and what we could potentially be doing, you guys are busy right now, right? You're extremely busy right now. And I would ask you to do me a favor. Take a look, if you had a crystal ball and you can look a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what do you see? Do you see the Department of Defense? Do you see U.S. Transcom having more mission or less mission? Yeah. And with more mission comes what? More work, more deployments, more stress, things that would typically lead to less resilient service members. And so I think it's part of my responsibility to figure out how do we continue to build resilience so when folks have to deploy, when folks have, because regardless of all of that, right? So regardless of who does what in the world and which war we decide or which war we end up in, or if we don't end up in a new war, but we continue the ones that we're already fighting, regardless of all of that, you know what will still exist? Family problems, soccer games, cats and dogs, bad supervisors, lack of clarity of purpose, all the things that lead to PT tests, that lead all of us to stress at times, all the things that typically cause stress and cause our airmen and service members to be less resilient and engage in destructive behavior. in the worst case suicides. In the Air Force, we average about 100 suicides a year, total force, active guard and reserve. If you add in the challenges that we have, that all of us have with sexual assault and other negative behaviors due to stress, it's clear to me that our service members are less resilient. So that's my focus. Some of this, I think, I can help by, again, removing some of the barriers and removing some of the stressors and some of the unnecessary training, whether it's CBT, some of the unnecessary additional duties. In other ways, I have to be able to make sure that we properly resource and support all of the programs that we already have. If you think about most military bases, there's a plethora of programs in the Airmen and Family or Family Readiness organizations, MWR type organizations that are aimed at helping airmen become physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually fit. In some places, they're utilized a lot. Some places, they're not utilized a whole lot. So there's no one cookie cutter approach. There's no, if you ask me, well, what's the one thing you're going to do, Wright, to make airmen more resilient? I can't tell you what that one thing is. So I like to take a comprehensive and fairly basic approach, right? So I don't want to make this complicated. I don't want to create a whole lot of new programs and requirements and make folks jump through hoops. I want to get down to the bare bones of, hey, what can we do to help you when the challenge comes? And most of us in this room can tell you the challenge will come. The bad times will come. The relationship problems will come. But when they do, what can we do to make service members more prepared, more ready to move through those challenges, to bounce back from whatever that bad time may be? So that'll be my focus for the next year, making sure airmen are ready to dive into whatever battle we find ourselves in and continue to contribute to the ones that we're already in, and at the same time, how do I help them become more resilient and take care of themselves better? I'll tell you something that's really worked for us in the United States Air Force that we've taken advantage of. It started in Air Force Special Operations Command. I'm not sure if any of you have any experience in SOCOM, but they have a program called POTF, Preservation of the Force and Families. And there are a lot of parts and pieces to it, but the one that I really like, there's two pieces of it that I really like. The one that I am most fond of is this idea of embedding resources into organizations. And so as you can imagine, if mental health professionals and other medical, along with exercise physiologists and the resources that folks need to stay healthy, both physically and mentally, reside in the squadron. So you don't have to go across the chaplains, assistants, medical technicians, and whatnot. And it's proven very, very successful in our Air Force Special Operations Command. And so we've taken that model and to the extent possible, right? So we don't have a chaplain or a mental health professional to put in every organization of United States Air Force, but those where we see the need, we've posted those individuals, and the results have been tremendous. A lot of great feedback. So that's the part of the model that I really like. I also like the part of the model that allows us to treat humans just like we do aircraft. Now, when General Rupp and I were together, every Thursday, I believe it was, we had what we call an ops maintenance meeting. So we would sit in a conference room. I believe it was over in the ops building, and every single 54 tails is what we had, tankers, and we would account for every single tail. And someone would explain to us why this plane is either mission ready or non-mission ready. If it was non-mission ready, they would explain to us why. And if it was non-mission ready for parts, somebody would explain to us when the parts would be coming. And so the POTF model says you treat people just like you do planes. And so every Thursday you should sit down and look at every single person whether you decide to give them a tail number or use their last name or social security number or what have you, and are they mission ready? If not, they don't have dental, they don't have medical, they don't have this training, they don't have that training, and somebody should explain to us why. And even that kind of objective part is okay. The part where I think we could really benefit is when somebody says, Wright has all of his stuff. He's got his medical, he's got his dental, he's got the training, but he just went through a divorce and he's been acting a little bit strange lately. Maybe we should pull him off the line for a day or two to make sure he can get all his stuff squared away before we get him back out. Right now, I'm not professing that every time someone has a boo-boo that you say, oh yeah, man, why don't we pull him or her off the line? But the concept of, if we tracked our people the way that we tracked airplanes or ships or tanks or vehicles or what have you, maybe we'd have a better chance at succeeding in helping them become more resilient. What's on your mind? What questions do you have for me about our United States Air Force or anything that's happening around the world?
Hey, Chief. Major Constable Ronnie. Pleasure to talk to you today. As a former NCO myself, it's just a real privilege to talk to you. My question is, I have a brand new airman, my second oldest son, who just graduated basic a few months ago. And so in thinking of his future career, my question to you is, what are your thoughts on the decision points for new airmen who are wrestling with the idea of staying in for a whole career versus serving and separating? Thanks, Chief.
Yeah, so as all of us as I won't say all of us, but most of us as service members, we wrestle with this, both officer and enlisted. You come in. Some people decide, hey, from the day that they came in, I want to serve and do 20 or 30 years and retire from the Air Force. I think I was a guy who said, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to save some money, I'm going to get some schooling done, and then I'm going to get out and live my life. And after my first enlistment, I had no money and no classes, and kept going, right? So I think this is what I tell young folks who are struggling with ideas like this is discover your dream, discover your passion, right? What are you passionate about? And not just, what do you like, what can you do, what are you capable of, but once you discover your passion, that'll drive whether you should stay in, whether you should get out, and it could drive it directly. You may enter the Air Force as a weather technician, and your passion is to be a meteorologist. And so, yep, I can pursue my passion through my Air Force career. But your passion might be to own a ice cream stand or whatever it is. And you may find that, it'll be great to stay in the Air Force because I can save up money, I can get the right education I need to be an entrepreneur and still. So I think it begins with that. If you base it on my supervisor right now and this base and how much it sucks here or how much I like it here, that changes. That'll always change. You always get a new supervisor. You always go to a new base. But what's kind of in here and what you're passionate about and what your dreams are, he should think about that. Most of us don't do really good at that. I think if I asked everybody in the room, hey, what's your passion? What's your dream? What is it that you really want to be? Most military people, me included up until about 4 years ago, would say, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it because I'm doing pretty good. Military, you get paid twice a month, you got good benefits, and I don't have to really declare a passion, man. And then we get to the end, and now this probably sounds familiar to you. You ask somebody who's going to retire, so what are you going to do next? I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. So, yes, sir.
Yes, Master Sergeant. Petty Officer Kaleth, got a question. In my 10 years being in the Navy, I've been stationed at Air Force bases for 8 of those 10.
So you like an airman,
So,
really.
well, so you mentioned about joint.
Yeah.
Well, out of those 8 years of being at Air Force bases, I've either had to go to Navy bases thousands of miles away to do some Navy things that I needed for my career, especially just as small as getting things sewn onto my uniform, that the BX is undereducated and they don't know how to treat us and take care of us, along with Army and Marines and whatnot. So is there a plan with that joint movement on helping us out being more welcomed to Air Force bases?
Yeah, I like that term, undereducated. Yeah, it's code for dumb, right? Like, dumb. So this is a challenge I think we all can work on, starting with us at the top is. So we have several joint bases. We have several bases that aren't labeled as joint, but you have all different services that reside on the base. Yet we have very few, some of it is cultural, right? So some of the challenges that we face with Navy personnel assigned to Air Force bases, and Matt pointed this out, Chief Caruso pointed this out to me when it comes to simple stuff like TMO. That we all, as services, we have different rules about what you're entitled to and things of that nature. So we have to continue to clean this up. We took this as an action item during our DSELC, Defense Senior Enlisted Leader conference that we have with the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman. And we all had a task to kind of go back to our respective services and identify those areas where we can work through. Some of it is cultural, some of it is system type issues. As you can imagine, I mean, we have probably 175 different systems just in the Air Force that we use. I mean, we have some things in the Air Force that don't connect and talk to each other. And so if you're talking about, to me, that's an easy one. To teach someone at the BX, I mean, it's sewing a name tape on is the same. I mean, they may need a little bit of education. The harder one is if you're stationed, if you're a sailor and you're stationed on an Air Force base and you need to re-enlist, or you need to do something administrative or something career-wise, or to solve a pay problem. So those are some of the bigger issues that we'll need to get after from a systems perspective. But that's note well taken. And between myself, my counterparts, the other senior enlisted advisors, as well as the combatant command senior enlisted leaders, we'll get after that. Undereducated. Yes.
Chief Master Sergeant Wright, Petty Officer Williams here. Thank you. So I know with the recent policy change for Chief Master Sergeant for frocking, do you foresee that possibly may trickle down to the E8, 7, 6, any of the other enlisted pay grades like the Navy does?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we'll watch it first. So traditionally, we haven't done it on the enlisted side, but what we identified is that there are times when we promote Chief Master Sergeants and we send them to a certified Chief E9 billet, and it probably makes sense to go ahead and frock them so they can wear, because believe it or not, right, we can say all we want in joint environments, and I know the Army, my Army brethren are good at this. Rank matters, and so I know every time I go somewhere and I meet a sergeant major, well, who are you? Who do you work for? How many troops do you have under you? You work for a 2-star. I work for a 3-star, and so there's rank matters, and it certainly matters, not just in the joint environment, but in with our coalition partners and allies. So we'll watch it and see. We had our first request just the other day, and I think if I remember correctly, we approved it. So we'll see how it pans out and if it makes sense for the rest of the ranks. But what are we doing on time? We got time for one more question. Yes.
How you doing, Chief? My name is Sergeant Webb from Transcom J6. You mentioned that you're very passionate about leadership development. So I'm just wondering, what's your initiative or plans? You spoke about in certain situations, watching your show soldiers. Sometimes, empathy and certain characteristics in leadership doesn't come naturally for some. So I'm just wondering what's your take on that, and what's your plan or some specific things that you want to put in place about leadership development.
So we have all kinds of different leadership development programs, but really to answer your question about sometimes certain things don't come naturally to us. One of the things that I would say is that I'm a huge fan of is strengths-based leadership, right? So figure out what your strengths are and utilize those. So don't try to be all things to all people, right? So if you're good at executing, then that's what you should focus on and build those skills up. Now, we all go into jobs, right? So if you happen to have a job where you have to do presentations like this and be a public speaker, you can't just say, well, I don't really do speaking. So you should work on those things, but I think you should figure out what your strength is. Supervisors should figure out what the strengths of their people are and utilize them in the appropriate areas when they're able, right? It's easy to stand up here and say, but I wasn't born in this position, so I know how it is when you have mismatches and you have to have people doing things that they're not comfortable with or particularly good at. But I would say in general, what we try to do is make sure people are, if you're good at being a strategy person, then we'll put you in a job where you're able to do that. And then the key is, so you literally can't be good at all things, right? No matter how much some people say, yep, man, I can do it all. I'm a strategic thinker. I can build relationships. I can execute. I'm a great at decision making and all that type of stuff. The reality is people who think that are probably average at all of them, maybe really good at one and kind of average at the rest of them. The key, I would say, is find your strength, be really good at it, and put people around you from a leadership perspective who have the skills that you don't. Okay, so I think that's my time, but again, I want to say thank you. Really appreciate what you do. As I sit through the many briefings, both class and unclass, as I sit through and gain a better understanding about what's happening in this world and how we'll get after some of the challenges in this world, I would agree with Sun Tzu that logistics will make the difference, and our ability to get people and equipment and resources across this globe plays a huge role in our ability to defend this nation and defend our partners and allies. So again, let me say thank you for what you do every single day. Thank you.